Hey there, Mike. How are you?
Hi, Deb. Good
Hey,
evening.
hey. Hey, hey. Glad you can join. I wasn't sure if it was going to be just Barkha, you know. So let me just make sure. Let's see who's on the call so far here. Nobody that I can see. So you're going to get some questions tonight, and you're going to give me a kiss on the cheek when I take you out for a drink. But I had to put you on this call. So you're going to participate. People might ask you some funny questions. Maybe no funny questions come out tonight. I do not know. I'm just saying, forgive me in advance if any funny questions come up. And I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Whatever they want to ask. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to help them. I don't think people really quite understand what I do versus what they want to know about, but I'm more than happy to try and help.
Yeah, that's the whole point. People want to get to know you. So that's where the funny questions are coming from.
Do you have any ideas of what kind of funny questions you might be thinking could possibly come up?
Yeah, I mean, just what I replied to Barkha, you were on that email. People are interested in how coordination happens, how oversight happens. We've been posting how terrific you are. That's the rumor out there that Mike is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So people want you to have your hands on everything. You're going to have to explain, here's how I coordinate with the sustainability office and everyone else. And this is how, the agencies work together, et cetera. That's all I wanted, some commentary from Barkha and you about. And then I think people will be satisfied.
Well, we work together by me walking over to Andrew's desk or Andrew calling me and asking me a question.
Yeah, come on, Mike. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to kill you. All right, give me 5 minutes here. I have something in the oven. I want to pull it out and then jump back on the meeting. Give me a minute. You're a very funny man. All right. Yeah, let's make this available. Carol, this is Mike. You wanted to meet Mike. Carol is with Wild Ones. It's a new Hudson County chapter partnering with the Native Plant Society. She had some questions about planting native trees in Jersey City. We might have that dialogue now while I step away just for a minute.
Okay.
Carol,
Yeah, I'm here.
Carol,
Thank
meet
you.
Mike. Mike is a great guy. He's like
Hey, Mike.
on my top
Hello,
5
Carol.
list.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I just joined and just had a quick bite to eat, so I'm just catching my breath. Yeah,
I'll be back.
Okay. Yeah, the mission of Wild Ones, it's a national organization based out of Wisconsin, and we have close to 100 chapters across the country. And the mission is educational, to educate people about native plants, what they are, their relationship to our biodiversity and the need for sustaining these native plants. And so I know that you had mentioned, or somewhere along the line, Deborah heard that you said, and it's probably true, that native trees may not fare so well in an urban environment. Is it that they don't fare well, or is there a problem maintaining them, or what happens with a native tree in a city like Jersey City or even New York City?
So I wouldn't say anything in particular happens to a native tree versus a non-native tree. I think it's more that you want to have an array of species to choose from, and certain areas, if you just limited it to native species and nursery availability and certain areas, that's not always going to be feasible. So it's better to just have more options in an urban environment. I think it's better to be careful about planting native species perhaps around park areas, or maybe, if you have some kind of wildlands within Jersey City, which is not common, but then I would say, like, if you're planting around Liberty State Park, maybe you want to be a little more cautious. But in general, it's not always reasonable to, if you're planting, X amount of trees a year, there's going to be times where certain species are going to be beneficial that might not necessarily be from this area.
I see. I mean, there's a huge variety of native trees native to our ecoregion. So, I mean, there's a source that, but I understand that, you have to buy the trees, source them somehow. And, if you have
the
timeline of your planting season, I get that. I mean, that's very reasonable, of course. So,
the Division of Sustainability has a contract with Schichtel's Nursery from Buffalo, and that's where they purchase their trees for their planting contracts. So
okay.
when I make recommendations to them in terms of like what I see, I mean, what I usually do, I'll go to a site, I'll inspect it. I'll try to come up with 3 species that I think would do well in that given location, and then it gets whittled down based upon what's available at the nursery at the time in the proper size class. So, and that's kind of basically how that process goes in a nutshell.
Right. So are you saying that the source of the trees do not necessarily offer native trees to our ecoregion, or, because that could be the case. That could be the case because we have the same problem with nurseries. There's a handful of nurseries within our New Jersey, Pennsylvania region for native plants, and not every nursery or dealer or reseller or whoever sells native. So I get it. Not everybody's growing these things.
Yeah, no, I would say that there's a fair amount of natives, and then it also so if you look at the forestry standards, there's a whole list of species. Some are native, some are not, and then based upon what the nursery has, some are native, some are not. I would say we plant a fair amount of native species. I mean, it also depends upon what your definition of native is. Would you consider like a Kwanzan cherry to be non-native because it's from Asia? I mean, they graft it.
Yes.
It's pretty much the kind of tree that you would look at as being international, I think, in a lot of ways. So I mean, like under power lines, your species array for native trees would be like maybe some dogwoods, maybe yellowwood. I mean, depending on if you consider Kentucky native, like, so I mean, it gets kind of like there. We plant a lot of cherries. We plant a lot of apples. Apples are European. Cherries are, a lot of them, depending on the variety, are Asiatic. But they work under power lines. They're very hardy. They're beautiful trees. People like them. They're readily available. So and it helps with diversity to not plant the same dogwood under power lines. If half the trees that you're going to plant are going to be under power lines and they have to be small, and you're only going to have 3 or 4 species to pick from, it's good to be able to spread that out and have a lot of options. That's all it is. I'm not anti-native, but in an urban setting, I think that you need to be flexible with that as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the whole, it all comes down to understanding the hurdles that everybody has to face in all our endeavors when we want to improve things and come to common ground. And but a definition of native, a true definition from what I understand, it's a tree or a plant that has grown in our ecoregion for thousands of years. They've grown together with the biodiversity, whether it's the birds, bees, butterflies, and those beneficial insects get the best nourishment from those plants and trees that grew up with them. So cultivars, not going to give the same nutrition to monarch butterflies and even birds that need good native food from berries to make their migrations. They need a lot of calories. They need to eat a lot of pasta. So that's that when we refer to native, that's what we're looking for. So, but I understand it. Okay. And this meeting is not about my topic. So, I appreciate your time for sure, and love to have a further conversation with you at another time.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be open to that. I mean, just to what you just said. Yeah. Under your definition of native, then most trees would not be considered native. Like the honey locust is something that was naturalized that grows here now and wildlife uses, but it was definitely not here thousands of years ago. And Jersey City is the kind of environment that not a whole lot about it is natural that you would have found 1,000 years ago. So in that regard, almost anything you're going to buy at a nursery, like from, when you're going to get wholesale for trees, is going to be some variety of cultivar from people crossing it and trying to come up with varieties that grow a certain way or provide a certain aesthetic that they want. So definitely a
Yeah.
constraint, and I'm totally open to having a conversation with you offline about that as well.
Would love
Okay,
that,
so
Mike. I
it's
appreciate it. Thank you.
7:05 now, and I want to welcome everyone to this Community Green Committee meeting of the Journal Square Community Association's Green Committee and Sustainable JC. And special thanks to our guest tonight, Barkha Patel, Director of the city's Infrastructure Department, and Mike Diciancia, the city's Senior Forester, who's been carrying on a very in detailed discussion with Carol. So Deb, I'll turn it over to you now, and many thanks to everyone who's here, but especially to Barkha and Mike. But Deb?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And, I so love partnering with you. This has been a good row for the last 6 months, going into June, and then we take the summer off. But we've been doing this on the third Wednesday of every month, trying to build an audience for the public, introducing them to city officials and talking about various sustainability topics. It's a platform, certainly for officials like you, Barkha and Mike, to be known, right? You guys are doing extraordinary work, and sometimes people just don't know who you are, what you're doing. And, what I just want to say, just to close off what Mike and Carol were talking about, is that we now have, and we're starting to look at, beyond Jersey City, a county consideration around some of our advocacy work, especially with urban forestry. And there are a few other organizations in Hudson County. For instance, the Native Plant Society has just established a Hudson County chapter. Carol's organization has just established a Hudson County chapter, Wild Ones, with the focus on.
What is Carol's organization?
Carol?
Hi there. It's Wild Ones. It's a national nonprofit established 1977 out of Wisconsin, with the mission to promote and advocate for natural landscaping through the use of vegetation and plants, that are beneficial to our environment and biodiversity. And
Okay.
there's about 100 chapters around the country at the moment. We're about a year old here in Hudson County. And
Great.
we're called Wild Ones New Jersey Gateway Chapter. Thank you.
And as we build up green infrastructure in New Jersey, there's an advocacy approach. Even Rutgers is undertaking, for instance, with rain gardens, to use native plants, right? So who are some experts on the ground, and how are different municipalities collaborating with one another? Carol's organization now has 5 municipalities as a chapter in Hudson County. So some of these connect the dots exercises will sort of prevail, I think, over the next couple of years. It's just to be known that there's now a voice around native plants and native trees that sort of is coming into the mix of things. Mike just had a great explanation around how to diversify, and it's not always about natives. So the best thinking hopefully will come forward by people collaborating and talking to each other. Tonight, what we're about to sort of embark on is a conversation about, the participatory budgeting project, which was very innovative for Jersey City. Certainly, it's been done in other cities, particularly New York City is the one that I'm most aware of, where citizens get to vote on how council might expand some of the budget around projects of most interest. So there was a vote, and there was, some outcomes to that, and we're, I think, kind of leaning into how to implement some of this stuff. But I want to really leave the particulars around where this started, where it's at, and where it's going to Barkha, who, Director Patel, Barkha Patel, is now leading the Infrastructure Department, which out of the reorg, I guess about a year ago, was intended by the mayor to bring together, certain logical, divisions that would naturally, if they could be brought together, collaborate in a better way to bring, bigger and, more satisfactory results to the city particularly, and I use the example oftentimes with green infrastructure, if some of the departments and some of the divisions were sort of all leaning in and having the same conversation, given the priorities of the state to, accentuate some sustainability and resiliency initiatives. It's really going to take a collaborative effort across the city, across agencies, departments, and divisions to affect some high-minded results. And Barkha probably has the largest oversight area for the city, which includes some of what we're going to talk to tonight, given that 4 out of the 6 wards voted for more trees. So urban forestry and green infrastructure is something that she is looking at as a priority for her department. She'll talk about that and other priorities, but I think it's important for people to understand what the infrastructure department as a new department for the city of Jersey City does and what they've brought together and how that might affect, some of the vote in rolling out and how that can be done in a more streamlined and effective way that the community
Okay, Deb, so
would
why
like
don't we
to
ask?
see happen across all wards. Right. So I'm wrapping up, Bill. That was my introduction. You can introduce folks the next time. So Barkha, go for it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you to Bill and Deb for inviting me. It's been a while since I've joined this committee meeting and the association, so really happy to be here. And when Deb sent along the description for the conversation today, I agree with her that it's important to just talk about or to provide an overview of what this department is responsible for, to give people who aren't familiar with the entire scope of work that we do a little bit more insight into not only the work, but also the process, which I think will be the most useful for people who are wanting to provide input and have feedback. So I'll go through that quickly. I did also just celebrate 1 year, I think a couple days ago, from being appointed director. So yeah, it's officially.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'll be completing 7 years with the city next week on the 23rd. So
wow.
More congratulations.
A lot of anniversaries. Thank you so much. So if possible, I would like to share my screen. Do I have?
I think I just gave you capability for that, Barkha.
Okay. And what I'm going to pull up is something that we've shared with mayor and council so far, but we haven't really, and it's all public information, but we haven't specifically walked through it with community groups. And this is our 2023 implementation plan, which just outlines all of the work across the 6 divisions in my department that we will be working on this year. And so for everyone's reference, the 6 divisions within my department include engineering, architecture, which is responsible for buildings, but also all of the city's parks, the design and construction of city parks, not maintenance. Traffic engineering, transportation, sustainability, and innovation. So this plan is something we put together to give people, something to look ahead on all of the implementation related projects that we had in the works that we expect to be implemented this year. And the first one is, so this is just
so Barkha, just as a quick recap, yeah. It's engineering, yeah. Architecture, transportation, sustainability, innovation, and what was the 6th?
And traffic engineering.
Traffic engineering. Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you.
Sure. So this is an overview of the work, and I'll just, we don't have to spend too much time on this. And I can also share it if anyone wants to dig into this information. But really quickly, this is an overview across the city of just in the spring season, the street repaving and curb ramps projects that we have going on, and this is important. All of these projects will be important for sustainability, and I'll talk a little bit about why each one is. For this one, anywhere that we see an opportunity to introduce green infrastructure when we are repaving streets or redoing curb ramps or any concrete work, we try to take advantage of. So these are the streets we're working on in the spring. There will be more later in the summer and in the fall season. We're also looking into more sustainable surface materials that are permeable that we can use for these projects, that we can make standard practice moving forward. So right now we're, talking to a couple of companies, looking into different technologies, haven't landed on one that we know for certain will work yet, but we're experimenting because the goal is to have a standard practice for, porous pavement or other types of surface materials for sidewalks and streets that we could be using instead of asphalt and concrete everywhere.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, the next one is speed humps, which is really related to our Vision Zero effort. Trying to introduce vertical deflection and traffic calming wherever we can in the city, but specifically focusing where possible on our high injury network streets. So these are some of the locations to be constructed this year. We currently have in the city 678 speed humps, which I think is an interesting number to know.
It is.
Yeah, the next one is parks and buildings. So there are several parks right now where we are in that are moving close to either renovations or total rehabilitation or just repairs that are handled through my department. What this list doesn't show are parks that are in planning or design phase. So some of the big ones are Courthouse Park, which is in this area in Journal Square, some smaller parks throughout the city, City Hall Park, new spaces we're establishing. Those are in planning phase, and we are trying to figure out construction timelines. So those are not reflected here. It's just what we know for sure will be constructed or repaired this year. And then also some buildings projects. Same thing with this. We're trying to achieve compliance with the best of environmental infrastructure standard that we know of, LEED certifications on city buildings wherever possible, that kind of thing with parks and buildings. This is
So Barkha, are you tracking how many, for example, new projects, even existing projects, are LEED certified?
yeah, so by ordinance, we hold ourselves to a standard of achieving at least LEED Silver on city buildings.
For all new developments, you mean?
No, just for the buildings that are under city control, so municipal buildings.
So you would retrofit existing city buildings to a LEED standard silver?
Wherever we have the opportunity where there's work happening on those buildings, that's what we would work towards. Although there isn't a plan currently to bring every single existing building up to that standard. So for example, if there's an existing building that's a municipal building where we are doing a significant amount of repairs or rehab, during that process, we would work to bring that building up to a LEED Silver designation and apply for that. But that's only happening if we're already doing work to that building and any new buildings that we're constructing, which there are a few.
Is there any such standard for developer projects?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So really quickly, just for the next few things, this is our plan for protected bike lanes, which is also carried out through my department. The dark gray lines on the screen are the existing protected bike lanes. And then the green lines are the new protected bikeways that we plan on constructing this year. We're also working on, wherever possible, upgrading protected bike lanes that have been in place for several years and are proven to be successful to upgrade them with more durable materials, and then also to introduce barriers that are more environmentally friendly, something like a line of street trees instead of the concrete barriers that we use, raising the bike lanes in some cases, that kind of thing. This is our plan for curb extensions. So this is painted curb extensions. But again, wherever we have the chance, where we're doing concrete work, we like to incorporate green infrastructure, rain gardens with native plants. Really fascinating to hear Mike's conversation earlier about native plants, and just plantings in general into our curb extensions whenever possible. And then this is the one that I think will be the most interesting. So this document is a few weeks outdated at this point. We're getting closer and closer to our consultant Davey finishing the inventory of how many existing trees we have in the city. Right now, they've gotten closer to finishing their, so if you see where my cursor is right now, and I can zoom in, there's all of this empty area up in the heights that's not accounted for. So that's the latest area they've been working on inventorying. And just from the work that they've done here, we're up to more than 16,000 trees in the inventory so far. Still not completed, so the number will be a little higher than that. But just over the course of a few weeks, they've completed this area. There are still, you know, as you can see, many pockets of the city that are still to be accounted for. So
and that project is street trees and city parks, correct?
exactly. So the plan for tree plantings this year is to do 150 tree plantings this spring. That work has already been underway. I'm not sure if anyone has seen it in person, but my staff and Mike have been supervising the contractor who are doing the tree plantings. The work's been going on for the last several weeks. The latest one, which I think is really exciting, was the planting of 28 trees around PS 23, the Mahatma Gandhi School, which is a city block that had 0 street trees. So that's a really exciting location. And there will be an additional 150 tree plantings as a part of this program later in the fall. So that is this plan, and that's the last.
And an additional 150 trees besides those that have already been planted thus far this year. Is that correct, Barkha?
Yeah, so the plan was 150 this spring. Mike,
okay.
feel free to jump in on how many of that 150 number we've already done as of today. It might be up to 100.
We're close to 100, 120, give or take.
And
Yeah.
I live down the block from 23 school. So at first I saw 8 tree pits last week. And then yesterday I saw an additional 5 on each side street, and I couldn't see what was down on Van Wagenen, but I thought it's great, obviously, because they have pretty nice landscaping on the, Romaine side, but they have some beautiful pine tree, and they have some, decent landscaping. But I think those trees would be great. I thought, considering how few, my neighborhood has, that I don't want to complain about excessiveness, of course not, but I'm hoping that we get them in other places, because
Yeah.
it'll really put a little spark into, how things look. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Renee. And so when we started this process and we were, identifying areas of the city specifically that are lacking in tree canopy cover, obviously Journal Square is the first one that comes to mind, and then also areas in Greenville in Ward A. So those have been the focus locations. A lot of these locations were committed, last year, and so we're carrying them out, but definitely keeping that at the top of our minds for all of the tree plantings that are yet to be completed. So yeah, Bill, to answer your question, 150 this spring, about 100 to 120 of those have already been done. And then once once the entire 150 is done, we would do another 150 this year later in the fall planting season.
Okay, and are any of those designated for, I know the SIP Avenue redesign is on hold now because of the sewer work. But have any of those, were trees part of the SIP Avenue redesign? Because I really don't know that we got into that. That was like August of 2021. I think we had that meeting. And when they said it would start in 2023, it sounded like, you know, oh my God, that far away. But the sewers and the sinkholes have taken over now. So I don't even know where we are with SIP Avenue.
So would that be a capital improvement project, SIP Avenue project?
Yeah, so the redesign and reconstruction of SIP Avenue definitely is a capital improvement project. A lot of that is grant funded through an NJTPA grant. Let me stop sharing here. And this is, thank you for bringing that up. Unfortunately, this has been the case for several of our local safety projects that are funded through NJTPA, which is a great program because we can actually make a lot of those major investments into a streetscape, like tree plantings and hardscaping certain areas, landscaping certain areas, adding in new lighting. All of those things are elements of a streetscape project that we typically can't do just with capital funding. It often is just not enough. So it's a really great grant program and we really rely on it. The issue is that they have been through, you know, whatever administrative issues they're dealing with right now, they've been so delayed that a lot of our projects that have already been waiting for several years are now pushed back several more years before we can even start any sort of implementation. So it is putting us in a difficult position for SIP Avenue, for West Side Avenue, for Communipaw, and for Garfield. So we're trying to manage those projects as best as we can, but street trees were a part of the design that we proposed.
I have a question.
Just really quick to zoom out a little bit to just address this, Barkha, without getting into the weeds. So we're planting maybe 300 trees. The budget has been cut. We were moving in the direction of planting more trees than ever, 500, 550. That still left us on a slippery slope because the canopy was deteriorating. So I know that you guys are looking for planting funding to enhance what was available in the city's budget for 300 trees this year, which is less than last year. If you can comment on that, and then also comment on, as these capital improvement projects come online, and you can use, you know, trees because it's of common interest and concern. You know, everybody wants to weigh in on whether it's the SIP Avenue project or West Avenue, or whatever, with what is being designed and planned for, including, you know, more green infrastructure and, you know, trees and some other amendments. How does the public, how does the community interact with you as these capital improvement projects come online, and given the priority of green infrastructure and urban forestry, and, you know, because we're trying to play catch up here with trees in Jersey City, how does that all come together as a public conversation, in theory, through your office?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll address the first thing first, which is, yes, the budget. We would have liked to have a greater budget allocated to tree plantings this year. It's been a tough budgetary year across the board for all of the departments and all of the projects. So 300 is the number that we think we can achieve just with city funding. And so because of that, we want the number to be much higher for this year and future years. So in future years, what I'm going to work on is trying to get tree plantings as a line item in the bond ordinance. So there's a sustainable source of funding for tree plantings year after year that is funded through the capital bond and not just through operating funds, which fluctuate from one year to the next, depending on various constraints and various conditions on what the city is dealing with. But if there's
that by itself is great.
Yeah. So, but if there's capital funding associated with it, one, it cannot easily be taken away and reallocated to other things. So that ensures that we have a specific amount of money allocated to this project, which is a priority, obviously for all of you, for us, for the mayor and the administration. And it allows the planning process to happen a little bit more efficiently, and we get a little bit of breathing room to think about locations that really need to be addressed and the best way to do it, instead of backing into a number because we have a limited budget. Like, I'm trying to get away from that model. So that's the plan for the future, in addition to us just constantly trying to apply to all of the grant funding that's available through the federal government and through the state DEP whenever we see opportunities. So Deb and a lot of the members of some of the other environmental groups, the Parks Coalition, the Shade Tree Committee, have all over the past few weeks been sending to me and my team all the grant opportunities that they're seeing coming online. And we've been combing through them, trying to determine which ones that we would be competitive for so we can put in applications. There are a few of you who are also helping us write the applications because you know that we're short-staffed. I really appreciate if you're on the call, your support with that. It really is, goes a long way. So that's the first part. The second question was how best to engage with our department when these things are coming online, right? Was that the—
Yeah, the capital improvement projects, which seem to sometimes show up. I mean, that's how they've been described to SJC a little bit, as a black hole.
Yeah.
And the community only gets to catch up with those in the tail end of things.
Yeah. Well,
So—
I would say I'm really open to, if you all have a method in mind that you think would be really successful for the collaboration between the city, my department, and you, I'm very open to it. The system right now is that typically through each of the associations that are active and involved, like the Journal Square Association or other groups throughout the city, typically I'm in touch with the leaders of each of those organizations on a pretty regular basis. And that's how the initial conversation is happening. And then we, put the people in touch with project managers on my team, who then send regular updates out. We do community meetings, usually in partnership with whatever that association is, as opposed to the department just going out and saying, this is a project that's happening, what do you think? Like, we don't really see you as being on the other side of it. I really view everyone as partners on these projects. So it's been like that,
And that includes the business districts.
Yeah, the business districts as well. Typically what we do is, or what I've been trying to do more of, is that on any given project that's a capital project, we usually have an internal steering committee. And that's typically a group of people from within the city who have anything at all to do with the type of project that we're carrying out. So if we're doing a streetscape project, not only will it involve my planners and traffic engineers and sustainability person, it will also involve the planning division, because there's probably development happening that we want to be in alignment with whatever work is happening on the street, and also with the MUA because of utilities underground, and with police because we want proper enforcement of a new design on the street, etc. So in addition to that steering committee, what I've been trying to do is set up a group of stakeholders who then join that internal task force, essentially, so that they—
You mean community stakeholders?
Yeah, community stakeholders, so they could be drivers of the project. For example, we've been doing that for—
That's great.
The capital project, which is Courthouse Park, where the city is taking ownership of the Hudson County administrative building. And the plan is that once the county employees move out of that building into the new courthouse building, that building would be demolished and the city will then build a brand new park on that site. So we have an internal committee which is city staff as well as the consultants who have been hired to design that project with us. And at the table are also the leaders of the Courthouse Park Advocacy Group, who join a lot of those meetings on a monthly basis, and they are as involved in the internal decision-making process as other city officials, which, you know, since they're the liaison with other community members and they have FaceTime with residents and their neighbors, that's been working pretty well. So if that is something you think could work for this association, we can follow that model. But if you think another way would be better, I'm very open to it.
Barkha, on a slightly different subject, it's great, but 300 trees are being planted this year. I wish it were more, but as you and Mike and Deb all know, and probably everyone knows, planting a tree is one thing, making sure that it grows and is properly maintained is another thing. And we've all seen too many trees that were planted and then died soon thereafter. And I just want to make sure that, you know, you're keeping tabs on the situation to make sure that those trees are properly maintained. Is that part of the contract with the contractor that's planting the trees?
Yeah, I think the best indicator of the fact that we're doing a better job of that than we've done in the past is the contractor is getting pretty annoyed with how much we're micromanaging them. And there's a reason for that. I'll let Mike speak to that a little bit more. But yeah, you know, the contractor has been used to sort of coming into our city, doing things the way they feel is right, and leaving. They're not really invested in, you know, the health and the prosperity of the new trees that we've planted. They're just doing their job. And so one major difference that I've noticed just on the ground as I've been joining the team as they're doing supervisions is that we're keeping a very watchful eye on every single tree planting. Either Mike or my staff or Mike's staff are, you know, on site for every single tree planting, doing site supervisions. And I think the process is going a lot better. Having Mike on the team has been just an amazing asset for all of us. And I'll pass it over to him to just talk about exactly what that process looks like.
And I
Thank
just
you,
want to
Barkha.
say, I just want to say that I really like the model you were describing, Barkha. If you can make a community stakeholder subcommittee part of the steering committee, as you've done with the model with, you know, the county admin building, I think that is a really good start. And I think that has a lot of promise. And, you know, we'll learn from that, see what, you know, works from that, see what is lacking and what needs to sort of be refined. But I think that's a really good approach. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay,
Cool.
Mike.
Yeah. So going off of what Barkha was saying, so far this season, it like she pointed out, we've had most of the time it's actually 2 or 3 of us have been out there at different times. Andrew goes out a lot in the mornings. I'm there a lot, and then also I send my crew lead Terrence, who has been around tree plantings with the city for a long time. He's been with the city for going on like 20 years now. So we all, depending on schedule and what's going on, we all try to get out there and support each other and make sure that we're on top of the contractor, not just to watch them, you know, almost like accusatorily, like they're doing something wrong, but also just to build a good relationship and a good rapport, and to make sure that they're doing it the way we want to see them plant. And if they have any issues, they can talk to us, or, you know, a lot of times you might have constituents that are on the street that have questions when they see the process. So it's been good for us to all be out there and kind of see how that works. In terms of maintenance, so the city tree planting contract has a 2-year maintenance guarantee, which includes watering in the summer months. It includes pruning if the branches are broken or need to be pruned. It includes mulching at certain times of the year. If the tree dies, it should be replaced, all these kind of things. I joined the city in August, so I've been here 9 months, give or take now, and I can't really speak to how it was done in the past, but I'm not sure, you know, with the lapse in staffing and the breaking up of parks and forestry into 2 separate divisions and the contracts being moved around, I think there might have been lapses, and I don't know if anybody was maintaining these trees. So one of the first things I did actually when I came in was to do an inspection on 2020 plantings, and we were able to get an inspection punch list out to the contractor, and they were able to go out and address maintenance concerns for plantings that had happened, at that time. It was 2 years prior, right at the end of their guarantee period. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing regular inspections on the trees when we, for seasonal inspections, we're going to be able to get inspection reports to them and then make sure that they're fulfilling their maintenance obligations. So that's kind of how we want to do that moving forward. Maybe sometime down the line, this is the last iteration of this contract, meaning the contract was, I believe, first started in 2019 and it's been renewed each year. I think this is the last renewal option we have for this planting. So after that, we're going to have to come up with a new contract. It might be something that we want to look at, thinking about maybe adding a consulting firm to the contract to do that, where they're out in the field with the contractor, enforcing the contract on both ends, meaning that we're following the contract as well as the contractor. But that's, something I experienced when I worked in New York City, and, I don't know what that feasibility would look like here, but I think it might be helpful. So it's something we're going to look at moving forward. But for right now, I think it's working well. This is our first time working together, us and meaning the new team, Andrew and I, and Eastern, the planting contractor, and I think it's been going well so far.
Yeah, Mike, a common question is that you have this 2-year contract. After a year, these are two questions, that SJC fields a lot. After a year, if there's an issue with a tree and the tree gets replaced, does the 2-year cycle guarantee period restart, or they're done because they replaced the tree?
No, they're not done. They have to maintain it for 2 years after. So like they finish planting, we do an inspection, the guarantee starts. They have to keep it and maintain it for 2 years from that period. And then there's the final inspection of the product is either accepted or not accepted. It's not a one-time replacement, and it's not, you replace it forever until, 2 years have passed. So is that clear? Did I explain that?
Yeah. So it's a going forward. It's playing it forward, so to speak. The other question we get is that the forester with these contracts, because that's a little bit, and it's not really the case, I believe personally, that the public reads through these contracts, but they would like the forester to be more involved in developing these contracts, as you suggested, maybe having a consulting component to the contract, or, to the plan, where you have a contractor that plants and then you have an oversight consultant, or to some degree. It wasn't the case in the past that people were aware of, just out of our involvement with the Shade Tree Committee, that neither the Shade Tree Committee nor the forester was ever involved with these, these procurement RFPs for contractors to do what you think might be the best approach, call it a planting contractor plus an arborist or an oversight person. Would you be involved with any new vendor hires or consulting hires? Is it the forester, you, Mike, that might have their hand involved with this going forward?
Yeah, so in terms of working on, restructuring a contract, I would definitely hope that sustainability would, seek my advice and work with me, and I'm sure they will. But I don't really know, like some of the words you use there, like procurement of contracts. Like I don't necessarily know how that works in Jersey City yet, so I'm sure I have a lot to learn on that regard. So I don't know exactly what my role in that would be. But in terms of making sure that the contract is covering the things that we want, it has the line items that I would like, and, it's following the best standards, and it's following our Jersey City forestry standards like that, obviously I would be totally on board with working with sustainability in that. And again, I'm 100% sure and confident that they would want me to.
Mike,
Okay,
are you in the
really cool.
sustainability division yourself?
No, I am in the forestry division, which is under the Department of Public Works.
Right. Okay. But Barkha, I understand that Ty Wagner has left, and so has she been replaced, or do you have a
She hasn't.
search
We're
into it?
actively interviewing. I have an interview scheduled tomorrow for the sustainability director position. So hoping to fill that position really quickly. And I'll just say, Mike and I and my team work really closely together. We see each other every single day. We're working on all of these sustainability projects hand in hand, as well as things like, parks projects that we're consulting with Mike on. So we would definitely continue that. To answer the question about the new contract, what that would look like is as soon as Andrew, who's on my team, and Mike have a little bit of downtime after supervising the tree plantings for this season, is when we would start looking at the contract, developing an RFP that we would put out to get proposals from vendors who would provide these services. And the main thing that we're going to be looking at when we're writing out the specs is, one, addressing issues that we've already noted with either existing or previous contractors that we want to solve for proactively, and two, putting in more specifications, just things like performance metrics that we want to make sure we're achieving through the contract, process for regular reporting, when, you know, inspections or things are happening, those types of things that really should have always been in there and have been a little bit lacking, just make them more prominent in the RFP. That is something that we can share with you. And if there's someone on your board, either Bill or Deb, who is specifically interested in helping us develop bid specs for something like that, we're open to getting your thoughts. But yeah, it's going to be something that we work on internally with my team, with Mike, with our law department, to make sure that we're getting the best possible contractor in place the next time around.
That's fabulous. And yes, I have someone, actually, Rennie Stoll, who's our representative on the Shade Tree Committee, which your team seems to.
Great,
like
yeah,
working
I know
with.
Rennie, and yeah, it would be great to have her feedback.
Okay, and before we pivot to talk about then the participatory budgeting rollout, right? Because we want to talk about that. That was the nature of this particular talk. Mike, you mentioned the forestry standards. Has the new forestry standards been published, validated, voted on? Are they done? Do we have forestry standards 2023 out there yet?
Yeah, so they were done, they were voted on, it was passed in the council. I don't know if they've finished, like if law has finished editing it and putting it online for people to access, but they were definitely finished in terms of edits, and they were passed by the council.
Okay, great. So Barkha, what this whole, you know, participatory budgeting thing, which, you know, was really innovative. It started in my understanding. I was aware of it some years back in New York City, and I was just so glad to see that being implemented, even as sort of an exploratory thing here in Jersey City. You know, what do you think about it, and what's the plan for it? It seemed to work really well this past, you know, iteration. I think we're ready to roll out. And where is it going this year, and what's the vision for it?
Are you asking what do I think about it philosophically?
I want you
well,
to say
yes, but-
anything you want to say about it.
What are the plans for it this year? My recollection is that residents were voting on the various choices in the spring of last year, and it's now middle of May already, and I don't think it's begun for 2023.
Yeah, let me give everyone the entire picture with participatory budgeting. So in my previous role and working directly with the mayor's office last year, we initiated a pilot for a program called Participatory Budgeting, which essentially gives residents a direct say in how city dollars are spent and what they go towards, as opposed to the other larger city budgeting process, which is governed by like council decisions, finance department decisions, etc. And essentially it's democratizing the process of how dollars are spent by allowing residents to first submit project ideas for things that they would love to see. Like, we want to add a new water fountain in this park, we want to plant a tree, we want to install a bench, etc. So all the projects were submitted to the city. There was a budget amount allocated, which was $50,000 per ward, so $300,000 total in the city budget, and the resident votes would determine how that's spent. Once the project ideas were submitted to the city departments vetted them to see if the project proposals were actually feasible and possible within a certain time period. So feasible meant like, it's something that's within city jurisdiction and not reliant on county or state or other partners. And then time frame meant, something we can reasonably achieve within a year. So then we narrowed down the project proposals, and the ones that were narrowed down or shortlisted were then put back out, and residents in each ward voted on projects of those of that limited selection that they wanted to move forward. And yes, so many of the projects that were selected were related to tree plantings across multiple wards. Because the city adopted its budget so late in the year last year, it happened mid to late October. Even though the winning projects were announced, we really couldn't do anything with that because it had to do with tree plantings until this year, because the budget wasn't approved until the fall of last year. It's really too late to, have a contract in place and select locations and start tree plantings because of the season. So that's why we're now talking about it this year. And I'll just
Could you just comment on that so that people have an understanding of what the budget process is? We're on a calendar year budget. So in theory, starting in January of each year, there's a new budget, right? But there's an approval process that you were saying, for example, last year took 10 months.
Yeah, so typically what happens is every year at the beginning of the year, you can, look out for this when we get into the new year. There's the first council meeting of the year, which is essentially doing a few things. One is formalizing the calendar of meetings for every single council meeting that will happen that year, and they take a vote on it. The second thing is that they reconfirm all of the council members. And the third thing is typically that they approve a temporary budget when they're entering a new year, because the official budget is not adopted yet. So the time period between January 1st and when the budget is actually adopted by the council is when the city is in a temporary budget period, which means funds are still available. Things that carried over from the previous year are still there. Projects can still keep moving forward. Operationally, things are still happening, but it's not the formal budget for that year that the council has taken action on and approved by vote. So last year, I don't know exactly why, because that's not really my purview or expertise, but the budget, which is, typically adopted either like early or mid year in any given year, took longer and was not up for vote by council until the fall, until October. And then it took even longer because once a city adopts a budget by council vote, it then has to be confirmed by the state. It's then sent over to the state, and the state confirms that everything is in order. And that is when the budget is formally approved. So all of those steps just took longer last year to happen. That's my bet.
We kind of operate a year behind, don't we? We kind of operate a year behind.
I wouldn't say that in general. Last year, that was the case, yes. And this year, we are still awaiting the budget to be adopted.
Well, Ash just sent something in the chat, a report on best practices for inclusive participatory budgeting. And, you and your colleagues in city government might want to study that.
Yeah,
Barkha.
absolutely. I don't know.
In your spare time, I mean.
Yeah.
Which you have plenty of.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. We look to a lot of the cities who have been doing this for so many years and really successfully. New York City is obviously the first example that comes to mind, but a lot of other smaller cities have been doing this too. And smaller cities in New Jersey who have been, who have a program like this active for many years. I don't think that the city, again, this isn't really my purview. I don't want to say one way or the other, but I don't think the city is going to be piloting it again this year. I don't know if they will in the future. So
why would that be?
I just haven't heard anything about it. So I don't imagine that it will be started this year so late in the year.
So for example, so far the process has been interesting. And if we talk about the rollout, and if the rollout is successful, that would bode well for, hey, this is a successful model. Why don't we do more of this?
Yeah.
That would generally be the drill. So what are we thinking about rolling out what we have going on right now? Are we saying we're stalled, or?
No, so what we have planned for this year as a result of the 2022 pilot program for participatory budgeting is still planned to be rolled out. Let me just pull up my screen again to show everyone what that looks like this year. So this is just a quick summary of what came out of the participatory budgeting program. So these are the 4 wards that included tree plantings: Ward B, Ward C, Ward D, and Ward F. These are the varying amounts. And then based on the most recent estimates we had of costs and the requests that we've been getting from communities across the city to include tree guards whenever we are doing new tree plantings, these are the numbers that we came up with that would be possible for new planting. So if we included tree guards with the new plantings, it would be, you know, these amounts per ward. So in Ward C, Journal Square, it would be 18. If we did it without, it would be 30. And the locations themselves have been, I don't know actually that the councilman for Ward C has done the walkthrough yet with us. I know the other wards have. So essentially what we did after this process is we scheduled site visits with council members and certain members of the community for the wards where we went to the locations that were specifically identified by residents in the voting process to identify exact locations of where the tree plantings would happen. So for example, that happened in Ward B, I think just a couple of months ago. We identified the locations, and that will then be in the tree planting plan for the year. Again, I don't think it has happened for Ward C, so we should probably schedule something with the council person and with you all, whoever's interested, to just do a quick walk and identify the locations within.
Barkha, where is Marala Triangle? I never heard of that.
You know what? I was looking. Ty actually put this together before she left. I was looking at that too, and I just forgot to make the edit or look into it. But what I remember is that Newark Avenue was really the location that came out.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a
So
question.
Ward C is the only ward that hasn't done a walkabout, is what you're saying?
I think so.
If I could jump in real quick. So we were trying to schedule, Andrew mostly was trying to schedule a walkthrough with Councilman Boggiano's office, and we had a couple dates, but then things came up and then we weren't able to lock it in, but we're trying to work on that pretty soon. We actually did, we went to a walkthrough scheduled with Ward F, and the councilman just didn't show up, but we're trying to also reschedule with him for that. And then Ward D, we have not done the walkthrough with either. Councilman Soleil has been very busy and has not been able to do it. So actually we've only been able to do the walkthrough so far in Ward B. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So Mike, we heard from, because we were in touch with Gilmore's office and their aides, and we were told that walkabout happened for Ward F, but it didn't.
No, Andrew and I went, and we were supposed to do it. And we were at the school that we were going to look at together, and Councilman Gilmore did. I don't know if he forgot or something came up, but they did not show up to that meeting.
Okay, great. So Ray didn't do that with you, with Erica and others, so that's still pending. Got it.
Right. But I did inform Ray and Erica the area that we were looking at, and they seemed to be into the idea. So maybe they were just, that's great, kind of thing.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, this is like playing catch up a bit. So the walkabouts are the first step with council members and community stakeholders. You cite potential tree planting, areas, and then what happens? And is there a target date? Is this all supposed to wrap up by, call it June, or how is this working out?
Yeah, that was the plan, although I don't know that just based on, how much time things are taking, it might be something that happens in the fall now instead of this summer. But we'll try to move it as quickly as we can.
So, Mike, as the forester here, the best times to plant trees are in the spring and fall. So we're coming near the end of spring. So hopefully in the next few weeks, the remaining trees for the spring season will be planted. And then for the fall, it would be September, October, early November. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they should be done this week or maybe early next week with the tree planting for this season. I wouldn't want to push it into June. I mean, it's weather dependent, but usually in June it gets pretty hot. And then in terms of fall season, the months you named are correct. With global warming, I have found that you can push it into December, and that's not usually a problem. It's really when it starts to become a frost situation on the ground is kind of too hard to break. That's past the point where you want to put trees in the ground. But yeah, you're correct. Real quick, I just wanted to also throw in, people were asking about Marala Triangle. It's on Summit Avenue between Baldwin and Clifton Place.
So there is such a place.
Yeah, it has another name, but I can't
Summit
remember
Avenue between where and?
Between Baldwin and Clifton.
Okay.
The other thing with the timing is also that we would have to order the trees, and placing the orders and having them delivered and all of that will just take a while. It's not something we'll be able to pull off in the next few weeks, unfortunately.
So that'll be part of the fall planting.
Yeah.
What about the other projects? We talked a lot, and I really appreciate that because there's so much interest. And tree canopy restoration in Jersey City for all the reasons we know around climate change, et cetera, quality of life. What about the other projects that the boards voted on? Where are those at? And what are they? And how do those get rolled out?
Yeah, so those are some of them. Well, just one other one of the winning projects is a part of my department, which is adding water fountains in Ward E to Grundy Pier, which we're going to be rolling into just a larger capital project that we have going on over there. And then the other winning projects were more community services, things like investing in a literacy program in Ward F, where we would pair students with people who they can learn from, and then also a young entrepreneurship program where we would pair younger citizens of the city with Jersey City entrepreneurs who are business owners in from the city, in the city, to learn skills. There are some after school recreation programs, that kind of thing, which are all handled by other departments. So I'm not sure what the status is of those.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So those would be handled by other departments that would make announcements about this stuff?
I think so, or they might also be waiting just to know clearly from the finance department the status of the funding of those things within their own budgets. So essentially what happens is this pot of money, the 300,000, was in the general city budget. And once the budget was approved, the finance department would then distribute the 300,000 based on who's responsible for each project into each division. So the amount that was allocated for tree plantings and that water fountain would be distributed to my department. The rest of the amounts would be distributed to the others. I don't know the status of that for the other departments. I've sort of, really fought to make sure that the money that we had for tree plantings and things didn't disappear. So I know that we have it. I just don't know where the other departments are at with their funding.
Yeah, because it's not really contingent on seasonal, right? Yeah. They can actually implement, in theory. And so how does the public learn more about how that gets implemented?
Well, what I would say is I can send you the list that was put out by the city of the winning projects.
No, we have that. We actually promoted that.
Yeah, and I would say the best thing to do is just reach out directly to the department director for each of those things. So like, for example, if it was an after-school program, that would be through the recreation department, or yeah, I think it would be through the recreation department.
Yeah,
Just-
people wouldn't know though, right? So there's the announcement about the projects. They wouldn't know where to go to check in on this. So where's
Yeah.
this sort of central office? Would it be the BA's office?
Yes.
Okay,
Carrie
so that's
V,
good. That's great.
Carrie V put a note in there saying whenever we have time, I would like to unmute to introduce myself and talk about what I do. So do you want to hear from Carrie right now?
Right, so before we move to that, does anybody else have any questions for Barkha about what we were just discussing before we pivot?
If I can answer the question I see in the chat from Camille about the map that was shown. So the reason you didn't see any trees in the northernmost part of the city in the Heights is because we're still completing the comprehensive tree inventory for the city. And so we've gotten to a lot of those locations in the Heights now, and they're now mapped. So the document that I showed was just a couple of weeks outdated. So that's the reason for that. And there are a few proposed trees there. I know there weren't a lot, but there are some going in the Heights. Thank you.
Okay,
you.
Corey?
Hi, everyone. I'm Corey V. I work for NJDEP. I wanted to thank you all for hosting us tonight. And thank you, Barkha, for that presentation before. It was super helpful. I started 4 months ago. I am not new to the DEP, though. I've been working for 3 years on site remediation, but I switched over to community liaison for the DEP. And one of my communities is Jersey City, which I'm super excited about because I have family who lived there before. So I'm very familiar with the area. And I'm from South Amboy, so I'm not too far away. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the initiative that my team is pushing right now, which is more trees in our urban cities. And
So Corey, is it that
Yeah.
your title is Community Liaison for New Jersey DEP?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
for our team name is Community Collaborative Initiative, the like department that I'm in, which is
Gotcha.
newer. Mhm.
So your
So-
predecessor was working with us who just retired, right?
Alan Miller was here
Yeah.
before? Yeah, he's still there. He's not retired yet. Can't
Okay,
get we want to keep him.
okay, gotcha. Community
Yeah.
Collaborative Initiative, so
Mhm.
CCI.
Yeah, he's going to focus now more on brownfields, whereas I'll work on the community liaison part of his job.
Gotcha, great.
Yeah, I still work with him though closely. So we are pushing right now for more trees in our communities, especially for Jersey City, because the handful of times I've been there talking to people there, they've really pushed for having more trees in our community and in and around Jersey City. So I just wanted to introduce myself really quick. There is money that's coming through the grapevine through the Department of Environmental Protection. So I want to make sure that I can get that money hopefully to Jersey City. So I'll keep you all.
Well, I'm sure Barkha knows how to reach you, or
Yeah.
And-
I haven't
and
talked to you directly yet, Barkha. I did send you one email, but I will definitely get in contact with you soon about all of our fun tree stuff.
So is it coming through the urban and community forestry program?
Yeah,
How's
we're
that
in
gonna-
contact with that group right now. It's going
Is
to be
that
going
where the
through
money's
different
gonna come
ways.
through?
Yeah, there's a lot of money that's coming through. Some of it right now just went to Sustainable Jersey. They put out a big grant not too long ago for schools, Trees for Schools.
Yep.
It's a big grant. Mhm. So that's some of the money that was going to that. And they're pushing it. I have good contacts with Sustainable Jersey. So if you guys are pushing for that grant, Barkha,
So
I
the
can try and get you in contact with some of the people there too. And
Yeah,
Well,
sounds
plug
the-
in. Yeah.
the school district in Barkha, we put Andrew and Mike in touch with the school district green team who wants to apply for that grant.
Okay.
But it would be really great if the city partnered with the school district on that, because they're not structured in as much of a fortified way as you guys. And 1 + 1 = 3. Right?
And I'd love to
On-
help
on-
anyone
on
do
some
that
of this
too.
stuff.
So
Right, and that was Reggie money, right? Right, Corey?
I believe so.
That funded Sustainable Jersey?
mhm,
Okay, so you're also getting money from the federal government.
right.
for
Right.
trees, 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 and more trees.
Yes.
Amen.
That's
Okay.
what we like to hear.
All right.
So I'm delighted that you joined us, Corey, and
Yeah.
Mike and Barkha are even more delighted that you
Right.
joined
No,
us.
I'm glad I could be here. I picked a good
Corey,
night to do
put
it.
your contact information in the chat so
Sure,
people
yeah,
know
I'll
how
do that
to
right now.
reach
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So does anyone else have questions or comments? And I know it's getting late for everyone, especially Barkha and Mike, who've been working all day.
Barkha, thank you so much. Mike, thanks so much. This is something that, we were wanting to, I mean, there was much more to this talk than just participatory budgeting. That was really
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
Right. And we recorded this. It's going to be available to the public. SJC, believe it or not, fields a lot of questions about your department. And so this is a pleasure to have it be in your words and Mike's words. Here's what's going on. And we're going to post this. If you have a presentation of any kind, any of the materials you would like to share with us, I'd like to post that with the recording of the meeting, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely send over that implementation plan for the department for 2023, because that's just the most comprehensive document showing everything that we have in the works that I think people will be interested in. And then as more of the plans become finalized, or as we even start developing the plans for the specific things, we'll share that with you so you can help, publicize it.
So
Terrific.
Sharon has a good question in here. Is the tree canopy measured by the number of trees, or is size, height, and size, or size and height evaluated? She asked because a lot of times an old growth tree is cut down and a small curbside tree is planted, but it's not the same for water management. So Mike, maybe you're the best person to comment on that.
So when you talk about how is the canopy measured, I mean, I need you to be a little more specific, because are you talking about how is it inventoried? If that is the question, then they do measure the size of the tree and the condition of the tree. So that would include, you get an idea of, the age of the tree as well. If you're talking about in terms of the value of the tree, that would also include the size. So there should never be an instance where, an old growth tree, for lack of a better term, is cut down without it needing to be cut down, meaning that it's either dead or dying and posing a hazard to the public. If for some reason an old growth tree has to be cut down for, let's say, for example, on 39 Mercer recently, we had to approve a tree removal there. The tree was healthy, but unfortunately soil remediation required that they dig down 10 feet within 1 foot of the tree. And that, is not going to be sustainable. It's going to kill the tree. It's going to make it unstable. It's going to cut all its roots out. So we had to approve removal there. The value of that tree, because it was like a 22-inch caliper tree, ended up being close to $11,000. So that, when you put that back into planting, you're talking about planting, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 trees at that point. So it's not just, one tree for one tree. So in instances where you're cutting down mature trees and one tree gets planted, that would not be acceptable. And that's not how it's supposed to work.
So I just want to chime in here because we field a lot of questions about this. People think in good, with good intentions, that if they cut down one tree, that if they replace it with 3 trees, that we're good, right? So to the point of the question, and I'm not seeing who had to ask that, was it Sharon?
Sharon.
The idea is that both developers and others don't quite understand that we're losing ecosystem benefits by taking down a mature tree and replacing it with young trees. In some instances where that's required because the tree has sort of lived its life, and some people would say, well, for example, the 150-year-old trees, the 3 of them that were taken down on JFK had not reached their full maturity. But in some cases, it's oftentimes suggested that 30, 35, 40 years is the usual lifetime of an urban street tree. So we do lose ecosystem benefits, and it is not the case that it's common knowledge by far that when we cut down a mature tree and replace it with 3 younger trees, that we are kind of fulfilling on that equation. So it's
Yeah.
problematic, and a lot of SJC's educational outreach tries to address that, but we're not succeeding. We're not, we're not getting to the finish line on that education, I gotta say.
Yeah, Deb, I'm 100% with you on that. You can't replace an old tree, right? Like that's 30 years of time that you would have to replace, which is impossible. But unfortunately, sometimes trees do have to be removed for given reasons. So in that case, the best that you can do is replant, and you want to try and replant more trees, because the idea being, if you plant 3 trees and they survive, 30 years from now, you'll have 3 times the benefits. And 3 is an arbitrary number. It doesn't work that way. You're supposed to take the area of the trunk and then replace it, by trunk area. So you would want to get the same amount of wood, basically, in a way, put back to replace that tree. And I know that that's not necessarily happening right now, and that's something that I want to work on fixing. That's something as the new forester, we really need to get a better handle on that in the city, because in a lot of ways, you could say that things happening with trees in Jersey City in the past have kind of been like the Wild West. So now that forestry is its own division, I would like to definitely work on fixing that, because we, in the new forestry standards, which we talked about earlier, we did adapt basically New York City's tree evaluation method for us. So
Right.
if a developer wants to remove a private tree and for whatever reason it has to happen, they have to make restitution, and that restitution is based on the size of the tree and the health of the tree.
Yeah, and just in terms of that number, because Barkha shared, so for example, if what we were going to do was implement, the participatory budgeting, called the 50 grand in each ward, focused on X number of trees with guards, without guards. It's extraordinary, and I don't think people realize this, because in other areas it's less expensive. We're kind of on par with New York City. What is the all-in, just to say this, Mike, the all-in cost of planting a tree in Jersey City?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say I would not say that Jersey City is on par with New York City. When I worked in New York City for 4 years prior to coming to Jersey City, I planted in Manhattan, and my cost per tree was closer to $5 grand with no tree guard.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
Yeah, and it differs by borough, so it's not as expensive. Like if you were going to plant in Brooklyn, it's closer to $3 grand. If you're planting in Staten Island, I would say Jersey City and Staten Island are a lot closer.
So what are we at, $2,000?
So yeah, so here our standard tree bed size, what we ideally want to get when we plant a tree is a 10-foot by 5-foot tree bed. And then, so that is excavation cost. So depending on whether you're cutting out concrete of the sidewalk and replacing the soil, or whether it's an existing tree bed, the prices would change. But for the most expensive tree bed, meaning a 10 by 5, completely cut into the concrete, and total replacing of the soil and the planting of the tree with a 2-year maintenance guarantee and all that good stuff, comes out to about, it's just under $2,000.
Yeah. Mike, what are tree guards?
So tree guards are something that the city has a spec for in the forestry standards, but we do not have as a line item in our contract, so we actually can't install them. But basically, they're about 3-foot tall fences, for lack of a better term, that go around the tree bed. The front would be open curbside to allow for car doors to open, but the rest of the tree would be protected on 3 sides on the sidewalk. And there's been a number of studies, I think Columbia, was the last one that I had read, that talk about, the benefits of tree guards. They basically allow stormwater to still enter the tree pit because they are not closed in on the bottom of the tree guard, they're open, but they protect the tree from, basically the biggest thing is compaction, which also benefits stormwater runoff, because as you know, when you put these trees in the street and people walk through the tree bed, or cars drive up onto the sidewalk, now the soil becomes almost like a concrete mix, and not as much water is permeating the surface, and it also damages the tree roots. So putting in the tree guards is definitely a big benefit to protecting the tree from vehicles and traffic, as well as people walking through the tree beds, or piling garbage in the tree bed, or dogs. It's a little bit more difficult for certain dogs to get in there. I mean, you're still going to get the small dogs that are going to be put in there, but I have a chocolate lab who's about 100 pounds, and I couldn't get him into a tree guard. So things like that, that would basically be the description of a tree guard.
So Ty,
Thank
before
you.
before she left the city, she was actually doing a research project to identify reasonably priced tree guards for the city. Did we ever get to that?
Ty was basing her estimates off of something on the New York City Parks website, which was their, they call it Tree Trust. I think before that it was called Tree Time, but it's basically this organization within the Parks Department that takes quote unquote tax deductible donations from people that want to install tree guards. So, you know, a lot of times it would be a business improvement district or a building that had a lot of money, and they could donate to the Parks Department, and the Parks Department would put in the tree guards for them, and then they could write it off on their taxes. And so I don't know what those costs would look like if we were sourcing from vendors in Jersey versus what they were getting in New York City. I couldn't say, I'm not sure. That would be something to look into, but I know that Ty's numbers, and that was what was in the presentation, are based off of what she got off of the New York City website.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All
We're
right.
also trying to find the right product as we're looking at similar types of issues just within our parks and other areas of green infrastructure for that type of barrier, or, you know, low barrier or protection. An example is in Ferris Triangle in Greenville, where the community has been really active with native plantings and are seeing them just not get the opportunity to grow and thrive because of either people walking over them or just, you know, so they've requested things like that of us in areas where there have been utility projects where we're requiring the MUA to reconstruct the street and the curb and then put in green infrastructure. We're looking at similar type of low fencing. So as we experiment with some of these things on various projects, hopefully we'll get to a preferred product or model and try to use it based on context across the board for tree plantings, for green infrastructure, in curb extensions, and plantings in parks.
Gotcha. Thank
Okay,
you.
so-
Thanks, Barkha.
Anything else, or for myself, I just want to say thank you to everyone, but especially to Barkha and Mike for really educating us, and Corey as well for joining us, and Ash, your contribution there with that link on participatory budgeting. I hope that the city, if it does not do it this year, will resurrect it in future years, because I think it's a very worthwhile exercise. Deb, do you want to add anything? Our next meeting is June 19th, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, and Barkha, just in terms of what you have going on under your umbrella there, we have invited Schneider to,
Yes, they did
right?
tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to give you a heads up there. We have Schneider coming in June to talk about what they're doing with energy efficiency programming for you guys, and we'll catch up on that front. And then the school district, through their commitment, they hired a new business administrator and they've established a green team. They've now also hired their own ESCO. We've invited, and we had that meeting with Mike and Andrew with that green team, but we've invited the school district ESCO to present in September.
Great.
So yeah, so there'll be some, hopefully some communication between the two. You certainly can attribute least of all to each other's scorecards. So we're going to take off after June. We're going to take off for the summer. So we're not going to do this in July and August, right?
Okay.
So we're going to wrap up the season in June with the city's energy, services company to talk about energy efficiency that's going on within the city of Jersey City. And then we'll pick up with everybody in September just to give folks a timeline. We do this every month, the third Wednesday of the month. And, we appreciate you sharing this with your circles because we're trying to grow the audience for the program.
Yeah, and I misspoke. The date will be June 21st, which actually is probably the first day of summer, but
Yeah.
And the summer solstice, I think, too.
yes,
Right.
indeed.
Right.
Okay, so
Bill, I'm sorry, can I just share with everyone, you already know this, the good news, but the council did approve the resolution for the Bergen Arches RFP. So we'll be
Wow.
out. Yeah, really great news. Thank you so much, Bill, for, holding our feet to the fire, keeping us on track with that one. The next step is going to be hiring a consultant and then starting the feasibility study. So really looking forward to getting a great team on board for that.
So Barkha, as you recall, the Journal Square Community Association 5 or 6 years ago had a fundraiser at the Lowe's.
Yes.
I think you were there for the Bergen Arches, and we have about $30,000, as Mia, our treasurer, knows full well. And, you know, I've been pushing our board to offer to donate some of that to contribute to the match, you know, and it, you know, it's not up to me to say
Sure.
on behalf of the board, but, you know, we have that money, and if it can help with the study, I would hope that the board would agree to use some of it for that
Yeah.
purpose.
Well, that's really generous of you, I have to say, even to just, you know, do a fundraiser and raise the money is just so generous of you and the group. And yeah, let's talk about it anytime after
Yeah,
this.
well,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, well, let me and Mia know, and you know
Great.
how we can assist. You know, we don't. Yes,
Yeah, I
Mia.
just want to make a couple of comments. I was, myself and Steve Lanza, we started the whole fight against the Schindler administration for the highway they proposed there, and that was 1997, okay? So he and I were both on the committee. In 1997, 1998, maybe $1999, the feasibility study was over $1 million. So I find it hard to believe that it cost them, and then they came up with the highway as item number 1, and Parkland number 2, and the railroads were opposed to the highway because they were still using one of the trenches, okay? But then we found out later that the county appeased them by giving them, building a passover, I think further north, where they were at grade, and they wanted to stop that and have a passover. So the county built that for them. So they stopped with their objections on that. But I just find it hard to believe that it cost $1 million. And I think NJTPA paid for it at that time. Yeah. And that is what, 30 years ago, 25 years ago? And now you're going to do a feasibility study for 100,000?
Well, I'll say the 100,000 is definitely not enough for this full scope that we would like to address. It was just the amount that was awarded to us by the state, and we tried to match it with city dollars, and you know, weren't able to do that this year. So we were very strategic about the scope that we include, which will be taking advantage of the studies, the multiple studies that have already been done on the Bergen Arches, and updating the traffic models, updating the things for current context, but based on development and travel patterns and everything, to essentially prove the concept to New Jersey Transit that this is actually a feasible project that they could invest in or let the city do something about, is really the plan. But yeah, we've been looking at the 2002 study that was done, every visioning study since then that was done, and trying to really stretch the $100,000 to cover as much as it can. But yes, it's true that that is not an appropriate amount for really what we would like to do.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, back then, right. But we came to the conclusion that whoever pays the consultants, you get the results. So the city at that time the mayor was pushing for a highway. So they spent the $1 million to say, oh, well, they recommend a highway. It never went through because we lobbied against it. And I think the county exec dropped out, and also the mayor was running for governor and he lost. So I think then the city lost the, what was that called? A T1 or something like that. One of the Congress people had allocated some money to that, like 30 million or so, I'm not sure. And then the city lost that money. So it was going to be partial federal funds at the time.
Are you talking about the most recent?
No, this is in the late 90s when Schindler was running for governor. I mean, I forgot who it was. I don't know if it was Guarini. I'd have to look back, but he actually got some federal transportation dollars. And of course, the city lost that because the highway didn't go through. There was enough opposition that they dropped the whole thing. Is it possible to get federal funding though for Parkland?
We've really been trying, but the issue with this is that it's always tough for us to be eligible for those funding streams if the property in question is not under our jurisdiction. We always need to have the state agency as a partner in the grant applications for federal funds or NJTPA funds or whatever it is. And that's always been the challenge. So I don't know that we would be able to do that. I will say that the difference this time, which I think is a positive thing that will yield hopefully a beneficial result, is that we are developing the scope of what we're going to do with this study along with New Jersey Transit. That was really the biggest hurdle for a long time.
Uh-huh.
Where the city was saying, and Bill, you were at these meetings with me. I think you organized the meeting actually. The city was saying, you know, we will assume the costs. Just tell us that you're open to us studying this and giving you a design. We will do all of the work. We will pay for the study. And at that point, New Jersey Transit was unwilling to even commit to that because
Barkha, if I recall correctly, what you asked for them is what questions
would you need
want
answered
to be included in the study,
right?
For the study to be addressed, and they refused to.
Right, because from my perspective, I said I'm not going to let our city invest in a study that we're going to go through a year-long process, and at the end of it, the transit agency is going to say, well, this doesn't actually address the things that are concerning to us. So I said, we will not invest in the study unless you tell us these are our concerns, these are the questions we want answered, and then we will do that study for you in terms of fund it for you and do it alongside you. So it's not a biased, you know, because we're authorizing the study, the result is just what we want. And because we didn't get that
it died.
I think for probably various reasons, I really can't speculate why. We didn't kick it off because we thought that it wasn't going to be a productive exercise. But now, you know, I think my team has been really, really great with keeping the transit team involved, getting a lot of feedback from them, working with them to develop the scope of the study, making sure they're going to be a part of the steering committee, as I shared earlier on our project, along with the community, obviously. So I do think we're in a better position right now, even though it's a very small amount than we have been in the past. So hopefully there could be a really positive result.
Could NJTPA provide some supplementary funds?
Same thing, Bill, with NJTPA is that because it's not in city jurisdiction, it's hard for us to apply for the funding.
But it was never in city jurisdiction, and it's laid out $1 million to pay for the study.
But that's because the DOT helped, you know, put in the application to get the money, because the city said this is important, we want to study it, and the DOT at the time was willing to be a partner on the application and have the study run in partnership with the city and them. That's not the case this time around. It's the same exact situation with Route 440, for example, which is that we had this design in place. We want to turn Route 440 into an urban boulevard. We never finished the design. Initially, it was funded through the NJTPA and DOT, but now we want to finish out the project and we can't because it's not in city jurisdiction. We don't have control over it. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. Happy to talk separately about this with you, Mia.
It's really, you know, so some of this is an open forum type of conversation so that the community can get educated. Folks that hadn't been involved now just became, you know, more aware.
Yeah.
Learn something, and that's
not my unfiltered
it's perfect
commentary on the project.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay.
So good, everyone. You good, Bill?
Oh, I don't know.
I think we're good. So thanks, everyone. We're going to close out here.
Right. Thank you.
Right? So
Thank you.
See you next
Thank
month.
you very much.
21. Good night for now.